Welcome back to another Trade Alts technical analysis tutorial. This is the Introduction to Range Trading, Volume 3. We're going to be discussing macro value areas and how I use those levels in my trading. I'm going to have to apologize. First of all, my voice is absolutely destroyed. But I do want to get this video done, so let's get to it. So just going to go over these settings again very briefly because they're important and I'm still getting questions about that I'm seeing in Discord. So again, the default settings for the fixed range tool, you can see them on the left there. The settings that I use, the only difference is the row size is 144, and it just gives you more precision. At least for me, that's why I prefer it, especially when I'm doing macro pulls, because I want to see more data. Like I want to have, as opposed to only having a row size of 24, the data is kind of condensed down. I mean, you can still use it, it's fine. But I just prefer 144 because it's easier to see. And sometimes the point of controls will vary. So that's very important. So with that said, let's move on. So macro value areas. So these levels, they're important high time frame levels. That they basically show important support or resistance areas that are specific to volume at certain prices. So I treat them a lot like I do normal support resistance levels. This just has the backing of volume, essentially, which is really important. And these zones, again, like these are just like normal value areas, except even I would give these zones even a bit more room. They're not exact levels, although when you're range trading and you're pulling your fixed ranges and you have your value area high, value area low, that type of stuff, a lot of times you will see exact touches, right? So like if you look at Bitcoin in the current range that we're trading, we just had two really nice rejections right off the range value area high, right? So like that you'll see that a lot more frequently. But with macro value areas, again, you have to give it a little bit more leeway. They're not exact levels. I picture these more of zones than I do levels. But anyway, these are really beneficial to be aware of, and especially when you're zoomed out on the chart doing your high time frame analysis, these areas can be really useful to help you identify trades. So that's basically what this video is going to be about. I actually had this intermixed. I'm actually reshooting this entire video. But I had these intermixed with, I was going to show you examples of other methods that I use to use the fixed range tool and like certain areas where I pull from, but I decided to actually split this up. So this video again is going to be solely focused on discussing about macro value areas and kind of how I use those within my trading. And then in video 4, which is the one that's coming out after this, which I actually shot and I'm having to redo it because I ended up wanting to split it up. That'll be coming out immediately following this video. So there's no other slides that I'm going to use. I'm going to use real examples to kind of walk you through kind of like how I use it, how I pull it. Excuse me. And we can start off, just pick a random chart. Kind of want to pick one that I know is going to be, that's Bybit, not enough data history, Binance. So this is weekly time frame, by the way. This makes it easier to pull. If you go down to a lower time frame, like a 4 hour, you're gonna have to like really zoom out because you need all of the data, right? And you could use VPVR for this if you wanted to. I am gonna cover that later on, but I just like fixed range tool just because I like the precision, right? So, but you could absolutely use VPVR for this because it's, again, like it's relatively easy, but I don't know, it takes me 2 seconds to do this. So here's .USDT. This is actually the day time frame now, but again, you can see all of the data that we have here, all the price action. When you're pulling your macro value areas, at least how I do it, I pull starting from the very beginning of the historical price action all the way until today. So instead of pulling, like you've learned in the previous videos, like specific ranges of interest, your macro value areas are going to incorporate everything that you see. So you get your fixed range tool, start from the very beginning, you pull it all the way across so that you get all of the information. I thought this one would look like this, which is why I picked it out. So I want to say that there's only really one level of interest for me, and it's this. It's your macro value area high. So that is something that I mark off, same way you mark off the other ranges. So this is really the level of interest for me, which you can see that we're currently below. Your point of control, or your macro point of control, is way down here at $4. It is completely irrelevant to where price is at right now, right? So I'm sure if you want to mark it off, you can, but this is basically useless. Like there's no real, you know, I don't expect DOT to go down to $4 anytime soon. Obviously in the future, we get into some crazy bear market and everything crashes. Yeah, you might see DOT around those price levels again, which to me, that would be a screaming buy, unless there was some fundamental issue with the project, right? But again, I don't bother marking this level because it's irrelevant. You're very far away from it, and it's just another line that's going to end up taking up space on your chart. But again, if that's something you want to do, feel free. So for this type of chart, which you'll see this a lot with alts, and the reason why you're seeing that, we just delete this. There was a lot of consolidation here for quite a while. There's a lot of volume that got put in on these lows, essentially big consolidation before you got like the crazy pump, right? So in a lot of alts that look like this, you're going to see the point of control be shifted down towards like the beginning, essentially. The area of interest, when I look at this for macro value area high, again, this is a level that I am interested on, like the very high time frame, right? So if I'm looking for a swing trade, if I'm looking for a specific target, that type of thing, this is a level of interest. And like anything else, you want to see confluence at this level. So this is really what this is for. Like this is a big part of my trading. In respect to the macro value areas, is I use these as confluence levels for other, again, like if there's a monthly level lining up relatively close by, weekly level, golden pocket, that type of thing, right? Like I want to see something that has confluence here to kind of help give added strength to this. You zoom in real close, you can actually see once we broke macro value area high here, it's currently a resistance. So as it sits, it's not too bad. It's actually not too bad of an SR level on its own. It's not perfect, obviously. But for now, this is a resistance. So if this was to line up with anything else, obviously it would give more weight to this level being used. But for now, so like one really important thing that I want to say is that I trade macro value areas differently than I do, like range value areas. Macro value areas, again, it's all in the name, right? Like these are very high time frame levels. When you get acceptance below your macro value area high, especially for this chart in particular, I am not looking for this. So again, with the ranges, with normal ranges, if you get acceptance below your value area high, typically I'm looking for the point of control, right? In this, like if the chart was identical. Because it's a macro value area, again, I trade it differently. Just because we have acceptance below the macro value area high, obviously that tells me that this is a bit more bearish at the moment. As long as you're below it, that's what that tells me. But I am not looking for like the next target to be $4. That's absolutely not going to happen. So anyway, for now, when it comes to DOT, this is just a really good baseline to kind of tell me, again, we're below macro value area high. Again, is there anything other supports that we might be coming into, that type of stuff? If we get above it, again, just looking at how price is reacting to it now, if we reclaim macro value area high, that would actually look like a pretty good low, right? So again, confluence is everything. This is kind of not the best example, but you're going to run into these charts, like pretty often. And I just wanted to make it clear again, when you see your point of controls way down at the bottom, that they're not very helpful, right? So like you really are only going to pick the one level that is of use, which you'd be surprised, even though this looks, it's not like a picture perfect SR, pretty good for recent price action. You'll be shocked how often you see this level actually come into play, especially on lower time frames as well. So this is dot. So just giving you an example. The main thing I want you to take away from this particular example is that when the point of control is this low, irrelevant. So don't even bother. You can if you want, but it's not, again, I don't bother putting that on my chart. So here is another chart, everybody's favorite, my absolute favorite. I'm just kidding. This is like the worst chart in the world. It's actually not the worst chart in the world, but I hate EOS. I've said that a bunch of times already. So we're going to do it. I'm going to check it out. Again, getting my macro value areas, fixed range tool from left to right, get encompassing all price action. And here's one that we can actually use. So the first thing that I'm going to do, use this, your toolbar, is mark up my levels. Macro value area high. Point of control, which, look at that, interesting enough. Very relevant to where we're at right now. And then your macro value area low here. I'm gonna go ahead and delete this. And already, right, this actually channels pretty nicely as far as your macro value areas. They actually channel really nicely. And the majority of the price actions contained within this range, right? So if you were to draw a range for just from your macro value area high, right? If you were just to highlight this, which this might be a little bit hard to see. I turn this down a little bit. You can see that, again, majority of the price action is actually contained within this range pretty well. This on its own is a relatively nice range. So these levels are very relevant, okay? And you can see, just looking at this, your macro value area high on EOS is a phenomenal support resistance just on its own. You get some wash through here and there, but for the most part, it picks up a lot of these highs, especially look at this recently. Unreal, right? Like perfect resistance, perfect support. Unbelievable. So like this is really good seeing that. So here's the main point I think that I want to highlight. I use these levels. So you have to think in terms of bullish or bearish. And I'm talking about macro, bullish or bearish. What is the overall market feel, right? Right now, we're still macro bullish in my opinion. Now, some people might differ or say like that we're not. I disagree. But to me, I'm still looking for long positions overall, even on altcoins, right? And when you get a chart that looks like this, now this sucks because I kind of wish I had this, you know, I did this last week or something, because this is obvious. It's going to be very obvious, right? That I'm going to say, yeah, I went long in this area, obviously. But if you go back and look at, I'll give you a recent example for those of you in Discord. Go back and look at my cake chart and the fact that I highlighted that buy zone when we were, I think we were 27% above the buy zone. This is very similar to how I identify those. That's not exact, but it's the same type of principle on why I highlighted that zone where I did, and it ended up being like a really good buy opportunity. So what I like to use these for, especially, so if you just zoom out on the chart, you notice I don't have any other levels, right? Now, if I was going to do a regular, like my normal routine, I would go out and plot all my levels. I'm not going to do that for this video just because it's a bit irrelevant to a degree. But I would, usually the first levels that I plot out are my macro value areas, and then I'll start at the monthly work or quarterly and work my way down, right? So again, going back to, is the overall market bullish? Are we macro bullish? Macro bearish? you could be neutral as well. But to me, it's either kind of bullish or bearish, right? The fact that we're still macro bullish, I'm looking for long. So when alts have these crazy dips, which by the way, this run up on EOS, complete garbage. And this was back in May. So before the massive May dump, right? So when we had, so first of all, a little back lesson. Anytime that you have rotations into what I call dinosaur coins, okay? So for those of you who've been around for a while, you've heard me say this before. Anytime you have big rotations and you see a lot of money flowing into the dinosaur coins, it's the stuff that's been around, you know, since 2018 or before, and that really has no use case, and like the stuff that just spends eternity going sideways that nobody cares about. Once you see these coins pump this hard, it's usually a really pretty decent signal that we're near a pretty major top. And if you remember what happened in May, well, we were up at 65K on Bitcoin and we dropped all the way down to 28, right? So that's kind of what you saw here. But anyway, whenever you have obviously a big run up and then a big dump, which this thing faded the entire move, which is pretty standard for a lot of like older altcoins. The area where I'm looking to buy is down here by your macro value area low, because this is what this is showing you essentially is like from the like from all of the price action history that you've seen, the value area low is essentially like this is where you're looking to long, right? So just from your point of control, which again, your point of control is really close to your value area low. Just if you highlighted this zone, there's a few deviations obviously from that. And again, there's going to be levels here, weekly levels, monthly levels, probably that line up. But just looking at this, would you say that longing this region is a good idea overall? I would say yes. I would say that if you were in a long position, anytime price has been within this region, and again, you held this, right? You're very likely going to come out ahead. I don't see any difference here. Again, like coming into your macro value area low, this is no, okay, there might be another level here. If you look back here, right, there's probably another level. But the point is, we came into the zone and you saw a pretty nice bounce. So if you had bids sitting here, even if at point of control, through your value area low, if you had bids kind of waiting, so I'm going to be like really picky and pick the bottom here. But I mean, just to show you, in a very short amount of time, that was a 63% bounce. Even from the macro point of control, that was a 43% bounce, right? So like even just getting nice scalps coming into these regions when price has been away for so long. Price hasn't been within this region since the beginning of the year, right? So nice bounce, like up and out of here. That's a phenomenal trade. And again, that's very simple, basic analysis. But the problem is like a lot of people don't really look at these levels, right? But you can take this a step further. And again, like you can look to see if there's levels. I guess we can just do it. So maybe I'll find a decent example. Kind of went below that. I mean, I can put that there. Wonder if there's a monthly. No, see, that's pretty good. So a lot of the wicks that are down here, there's probably weeklies. Yeah, there's a few. So maybe like this one. This is untapped. Oh, wow, look at that. It's not untapped. So it's kind of hard to see because you can do this. But if you look at this weekly level that established back here in March of 2020, you know, price moves away from it. Look at this wick, perfect touch into this weekly. So this weekly's tapped. I'll still leave that there for now because we actually haven't come back into it yet. But again, wow, nice touch there. So that was a nice opportunity. Anyway, one thing that I do, so this is, again, you have to think of this from a risk reward perspective. you think of this from like a swing trading perspective. Like, does this fit within your style? This type of trading is not for everybody, okay? But I've been asked recently, like, what are some of the ways that you trade? Specifically, this is one of them. Like, literally identifying these zones. So you can come even all the way down to this weekly, maybe even like cover this weekly. You see, like, there's only a few wicks that have come, like, historically, only a few wicks that have come like through this level, right? And by the way, I would probably, like, I would consider taking this trade. I hate EOS, but this mindset, like this style of trade, I would definitely reserve it for stuff that you actually want to hold though, right? So like, I wouldn't be trading like this on any random coin, right? Like, this is definitely reserved for stuff that, like, I'm actually interested in. But again, you can see kind of how I expanded my zone to cover some of these lower support regions that we have that have historically held price action really well, right? So what I typically do is, whenever you see these green zones on my chart, these are usually buying zones, like areas of interest, right? So for me, I would ladder bids in through here. Now, again, it's unfortunate that I didn't do the stream earlier, because I would have drawn this zone identical the same way, but we already came into it, and yeah, we had a nice bounce. It's nice. But essentially, like, looking at this region. So, and just to tell you, if the macro point of control was maybe, let's just say it was around $4 or something like that, my buy zone would drop down to the macro value area low. So hopefully that makes sense. And you can do that as well. Like, you don't have to include the point of control. I just do because you saw like the really nice, the really nice, again, anytime price has been within this region, it might be a while. Again, this is like swing trade mentality, right? It might be a while, but you've got a lot of really nice pumps out of here. And these pumps don't look like much. They don't look like very much. But I mean, like, you look at some of these, and I mean, that's 78% in the span of a month and a half or so, right? Like, again, these are like really, so here's one big, deep retracement into this zone of interest. And look at this pump, like all the way up to where? Macro value area high. So yeah, which I'll get to that in just a second. But again, like, even just taking, you know, even taking the very low, just taking half of the zone, right? 136% up out of here. So like, these are how I get some of my swing trades. This obviously isn't the only way that I do it, but when I see setups like this, alts that are really beaten down, coming into major macro areas of support, this stuff is what interests me. This is pretty much the exact way that I charted cake, very similar, and coming into that support zone, and you like that held very nicely. So anytime you see these on my charts, again, this is kind of like, this is how I kind of arrive at this, and it's very simplistic. It's not that difficult, but it's just understanding. Again, you're coming into a major macro area low, and that's kind of like when you want to buy, right? Like, when things are ugly. Now again, the most critical part to remember is that we're in a macro bullish, like, market still. If we were in a bearish market, think in 2018, I would be a lot less hesitant, which this still worked, by the way, but I would be a lot less hesitant to buy, which you can see, like, this is where we got a really big dip through the zone. Obviously, this is very early on in the asset's history, but I would be a little bit less hesitant to do this type of trading. Still really good long opportunities, but again, you start to trade below that, it's kind of questionable, right? Like, then you could, who knows what could happen at that point. But again, anytime price has been within this green box, you've come out ahead. If you've been patient enough, you've come out ahead. So it's, again, that's for you to decide if that's something that interests you. Now, where do I look for as far as targets go? So let's say that I did buy this. What's an area now? There's going to be resistances. There's going to be fib retracements. There's going to be other, you know, indications that are probably going to make you exit before you hit this specific level. But if I'm longing the macro value area low, I'm looking to where the point of control is here. It's just kind of a bad example because it's so close to your macro value area low, right? So let's say again, if your macro point of control was $4, if I'm long in this region, my first take profit for sure, if there wasn't any major resistance beforehand, would be at that macro point of control, probably a front run of that, like a slight front run. But ultimately, your macro value area high would be that target. So this is, again, like this is a, so that is like part of the similarities to how I trade the value areas for ranges. But when it comes to macro value areas, again, you can see it's a bit different, right? It's not just straight level to level as far as the value area, point of control, value area logo. So hopefully that makes sense. But that is one way that I trade macro value areas. And this is, again, you're going to see this on a lot of alts right now. As again, we've had quite a big retracement on Bitcoin. Market's pretty beat down at the moment. But you're probably going to see a fair amount of alts that are pushing into similar regions like this. And if I'm looking for like swing long opportunities, this is the kind of stuff that interests me because I've had a pretty high hit rate of, this types of trades. And again, you can often get pretty good moves up out of these regions, even if they're just bearish retracements, right? Or even if you're just kind of getting a little bit of a bounce here. Again, just from this wick low to this wick high, 63%. I'm pretty sure, again, like, and it doesn't look like anything happened, right? But if you had bid set at macro value area low and it filled, you could have, again, 63%, and nothing's done, right? Like, just from here to your macro value area high, 125%. If you got another rotation up to it. So something to think about. But anyway, that's EOS. One thing that I do want to mention is that so like if you're long from here, you don't have to take all your profit off of macro value high. Obviously, like if you get like a big rejection like that, something like that, then okay, like you probably would want to cut your position. But you can still hold, this thing could still rip higher. And at that point, which I've been in these trades before, if I don't cut my full position at macro value high, then I get into like a trailed stop. So I'll just manually trail a stop loss on this position, and then if it retraces, I'm out, right? Because again, like it's a hell of a nice trade from value area low to value area high. That's a phenomenal trade. Like, I don't think many people will be complaining about that. But you can see that price does break above it from time to time, right? Now EOS, a little bit less likely. But if it breaks and starts pushing higher, there's no reason why you can't trail the stop. Or look for kind of like macro fib pulls, so like $10. You have a weekly level. So this is like stuff that I like to do, right? So this is kind of mixing up videos. But I figure while I'm here, so like looking for targets. I'm not saying I would like push this all the way to $10, but just to kind of give you an idea, 50% retracement is usually pretty good, especially on EOS. Like that's, I wouldn't probably push it that high. But if you broke here and this thing, was on like, had a really, really nice run up into this region, I 100% would cut my position there. Like instead of trailing, for me, I would exit here and just be happy and then not look at EOS, or probably short it, to be honest with you. But anyway, so hopefully that helps a little bit as far as like the macro value areas and how I use them, right? I think I'll probably do one more chart, but my voice is, which if you can't tell, my voice is obviously really bad at the moment. I apologize about that, but I've been doing a lot of talking recently. It is what it is. But anyway, so we'll probably take a look at one more chart. So we'll do one more chart. I figure since I was talking about it, I might as well just do it. So this is cake. Obviously a blank chart. I'm gonna show you roughly how I got that buy zone, like kind of that macro level buy zone, Which again, with those buy zones, you have to understand that like you have to do the calculation. You have to do the risk reward, right? So you have to identify. Obviously, the zone is your it's your entry, and then you have to look and see like what's a realistic target that you want to target off of that. What's your invalidation, and then you have to calculate your risk reward and see like if it's worth taking, right? Or like how you might want to play that. So anyway, fixed range all the way from the left to the right. And this one's a little bit different. So you see the point of control is actually like closer to the value area high. So it's the opposite of EOS. Same way though. Start at the top. Value area high. Point of control. And then your macro value area low. Which is the lowest highlighted part here. Go ahead and delete it. So this is, let me actually go back. So this is where your point of control is. It's really close to your value area high though. Really close to your value area high. Which isn't like that big happens, obviously. What I'm looking at is to see if there's any other high volume nodes that kind of stick out that maybe like could act as a secondary point of control. To be fair, I mean, yeah, there's one like right here that's relatively close by, which, I mean, you can see like this is actually pretty good support. So if I was to draw a level here at this, right here at this kind of higher volume node, you see that's very relevant, right? I'm not going to do that. But when you're looking at your volume profile here, like that, it helps to kind of take a look and see like areas of interest so that if price did kind of come down and revisit these levels, maybe you have a really high volume node here. That's not quite your point of control, but it could be something like that, which you see, we see this on Bitcoin. You've seen that example in the recent, in the current range where we're at right now. And then also if you look at the range from basically 30K to 42K that we were in from, you know, May through end of July, something like that. It's again, same thing where you have kind of 2 point of controls, right? That's always something to pay attention to. But anyway, so kind of like looking at this chart, right? So the first thing, you have your macro value area low, which you can see was like amazing support, outstanding support, right? So on this recent run up, again, nice rejection here, nice support here. So even breaking above, so like this level, like these levels are pretty good, okay? Cascading through here, resistance all the way down the macro value area low, resistance, macro value area, like you're getting full rotations, right? A bit of a deviation up here, by the way, and again, for those who have been around in Discord, you're gonna know exactly what the resistance was. Here was your daily Ichimoku cloud, edge to edge, perfect rejection there. And then again, kind of losing, getting acceptance back below your macro value high, macro point of control. The rest is history, right? Full rotation back down to this level. So anyway, remember if there's anything. So like here is a pretty good weekly level. This is kind of one of those like key level situations. You've had, again, a weekly level, push higher, back test, massive move up, right? So this is an important pivot. Comes all the way down, fades the entire run. Where does it stop? Weekly. Push up to macro value area high, comes back down to where? Weekly level. So like this really is a key level, but that's where it originated from, is that weekly, right? Either way, you could leave it weekly, but I just like to highlight these regions on my chart to tell me that, again, like they're very, like this was a really important level for some reason, right? It's as simple as this. Macro value area low, down to your key level. You can also include this wick if you want, which I think is fair. And I think I probably did that. Then I just make this into a support. This is my buy region for cake. So like this is basically like an area that I would be of interest. That I don't, this could be like a slight different variation maybe of the one that I've done on my other chart, because I had other levels here. There was it was more precise. Could be the same as well. I don't know. I'd have to go look. But this is basically how I would draw it. And again, if you go back to that chart and you look at this, it says buy and stake or something like that, because this has really good staking rewards. And one of our members had asked about it, right? So this is one that we kind of talk about frequently. But anytime price has been within this region, it's been a phenomenal buying opportunity, right? Like you've wanted to be long anytime price come into it. Even now, same thing. Go on lower time frame. So, I mean, this not as impressive. I'm not even going to take the wick low. I'll be conservative. 25%, 26%, just from your macro value area low. About 25%, 26% move off of that. Not even counting this wick. Which again, for me, like how I personally do this is I break this down and I'll ladder bids here. So I'll put my first order macro value area low, and I will ladder bids into this region. And it depends how I do it. Sometimes I'll front load. If I don't think that price is going to get very deep into this zone, I'll front load heavier bids up top and then work smaller bids on the way down in case I do end up getting filled. Or what I like to do more of the time, especially like it depends on the asset. If it's something I really want to be in, I might front load heavier bids here just to make sure I get my fills, because either way, I'm usually feeling pretty good about buying in this region, right? Or if it's something that I think is a good trade, but I'm not in love with, and that I don't want to, where my risk tolerance is less, then I'll probably start smaller bids and work bigger bids down into the lower region of this zone, just so that, again, it's similar to trading bots, that mentality, like you're DCAing your entry down heavier. But it depends what all I'm trading. So anyway, same thing. Like, and the nice thing about this right now is if you had your bids filled here, you could already have taken profit. And that's it, again, 26%, like 26% trade. You have to decide again, is your risk reward worth it? Like, again, what are you targeting? Personally speaking, like I think these probably go higher, to be honest with you. But that's obviously everybody's gonna trade this differently. But again, comes down into your buy zone, and you got a pretty nice reaction off of that so far. Could it come down lower? Absolutely it could. You've seen historically, like it's done it quite a few times, right? Where it's come and stabbed down into basically where this key level is. So like for me, just to kind of, it's not off topic. But like knowing that this key level is this important historically, I definitely would have bids around here. Probably front running it a bit, just because it's like in this case here, it didn't perfectly come down to it, right? So I would probably front run that key level again, but I'd probably have a pretty good sized bid there, because again, as it's come into it, it's support until it's not. If this zone starts to fail and get acceptance below, then it's like you're probably out of that trade, right? So it's important again to do your risk reward, find your stop loss. But for some people, it's again, like if your risk tolerance is really good for cake because it has a killer APR, or at least it used to. If you're buying in the zone, you just stake and then be patient, right? Like that's an option. Or again, if you kind of get acceptance below this zone, make a new all-time low, that type of thing, and the market looks bad, then maybe you exit. But again, market overall, macro bullish still. This is still the type of plays that I'm looking for, and you can see an instance of why I would still be looking for this play. And this is one that I gave out when price was way up here. I think it was like right around here or something like that. Like we had quite a ways to go down, and I said to be patient. Like for me, I said exactly what I said was you could start nibbling here if you really like, if you want to buy cake. For me, I sold here. I bought here, and I sold, and I had said when I sold, but it's once we rejected off of that, I was out. I think it was around $24, $24.60 or something like that. I don't remember exactly. So if I'm buying back here and I kind of have bids throughout here. Again, like this is a little bit different example because it has staking. Then it's not as bad. But like I had said in the post, which you can reference, that from a trading standpoint, I would choose to exercise caution, and I would be patient for this zone to hit, because this is ultimately where I actually want to buy. Price comes into it, really nice support. Got your bounce, got your 26% move off of your value area low, and again, like then you can hold it. You can move your stop loss to entry, that type of thing. Take zero risk and just see if you get your bounce from here. Plenty of different ways you can trade this, but obviously, again, this is like I just wanted to show you on a video like how I got this zone. And typically these zones, like there's more to it than just what I showed you, but this is a pretty easy one to identify, just because this is one that we've been talking about. But typically, like again, when it comes to like where I draw these zones, you'll see confluence, right? Like you'll see reasons for me to draw it. I just like, again, you could draw it just to this key level if you wanted to be a bit more careful, right? Because if you start to get acceptance below the key level, there's only been one wick below that. So it's like if you start to get any level of price action below this, then you're probably wrong on that trade. But if you want to be bit more leeway, have more bids coming down into here because you just have like you love cake and you want to stake it, that type of thing, then I don't see any reason to not draw your zone all the way down. And again, if you're making a new all-time low, then that's probably a different story, right? Then you're going to be you're probably going to be out of that trade. So anyway, macro value area low, area of importance from a macro perspective. To flip things around, not to confuse you, but again, macro bullish trend overall in the market, this is where I'm interested. Guess what? If the market is bearish, think 2018, macro bearish, I'm shorting every pump that I get pretty much. You flip it around, and when price comes into this region, especially when you get a point of control pretty close to value or high, something like that, and it gives you a little bit more of a solid level up here. But I'm shorting here or heavily taking profit when price bounces. It's the opposite. Okay, so just to be really clear about that, bullish trends, I'm buying. I'm looking for longs, and that's where I'm putting my risk on, right? Because this is, if you come into the zone, historically it's been a phenomenal support zone. This is where I want to buy, and I'm looking for higher prices. If the market is bearish and everything's, again, like it's sell the rips, it just flips around. So like then you'll see that it'll switch over to having zones like this around your like macro level resistances, right? Like that's where, if I'm long, I'm taking profit, or if price comes up into it, that's where I'm looking for short positions. So again, just to be clear on that. Let me think if I missed anything. So I went over the levels, kind of what I use them for. Confluence is really important, which I don't think every confluence is always important. Okay, it doesn't matter what I'm talking about, what indicator I'm talking about, what level I'm talking about. Like confluence will always be important. And the more confluence you have at a specific level, the stronger that level is, and the better trade that is probably going to be. Again, in this setup, if I'm looking for targets, I'm obviously going to have targets before this. I'm not going to get into that though. But definitely macro value area high. In this setup, I'm long here. Price gravitates towards this region. I'm definitely taking profit at these levels. And depending on the reaction, maybe I hold part of that position. And if we break above macro value area high, then that's when I start to trail. Because ultimately, like as you can see, this thing can move significantly beyond this level. Look at this case. You can have crazy significant moves beyond that level. And if you have the ability to participate when something is ripping up like this, obviously you want to do so, right? And that's where I just look to like loosely trail a stop, or I'll manually trail a stop to try to, again, like maximize my exposure there. But this is definitely a major take profit level. And if you get trades where, again, you're coming into major macro level regions like this, major macro level resistances and you're able to rotate, you can do very, very, very well. So hopefully this video made sense. If you guys have questions about this, obviously feel free to ask me. Hopefully I covered the stuff that I wanted to cover. If I didn't, I'll touch on it in the next video. But again, just wanted to highlight the differences between the macro value areas and what I would say is your regular range trading value areas. And again, hopefully you can see that there's quite a bit of difference in between those. Some similarities, obviously, but like I don't trade these identically the way that I would trade your normal range levels. So have a good night. Trade safe out there. We'll see you on the next one.